It's hard to believe that someone who lives their life in the public eye can go missing, when there are so many people who follow their comings and goings on a daily basis. But it does indeed happen, and sometimes celebrities who are reported missing are never seen or heard from again. Number 5. Richie Edwards is remembered for being the enigmatic rhythm guitarist and lyricist for the Welsh band Manic Street Preachers. Before becoming a full-fledged member, he worked as the band's driver and roadie, but in 1989, he was officially accepted as the band's 4th member. Although he wasn't particularly musically talented, he had a huge impact on the overall direction of the band and acted as their main spokesman. On the 1st of February, 1995, Edwards and the band's vocalist and lead guitarist, James Dean Bradfield, were supposed to fly to the US for a tour on which they would be promoting their 3rd studio album, The Holy Bible. For the 2 weeks prior, Richie had been withdrawing $200 from his bank account every day, eventually adding up to a total of $2,800. Some people believe that he merely needed the money for the US tour, or that it was to pay for a new desk that he ordered for his apartment. But the desk was never paid for, and it cost much less than the amount he withdrew. The previous night, he had gifted a friend with a book called Novel with Cocaine, and told her to read the introduction, in which the author tells of his time in a mental asylum before disappearing. While staying at a London hotel, Edwards placed some of his books in a box, which he decorated like a birthday present, and addressed it to his on-again, off-again girlfriend named Jo, though the couple had split up at the time. The following morning, he gathered his passport, wallet, car keys, and depression medication before checking out of the hotel at 7 a.m. He left his toiletries and packed suitcase behind, and then drove to his flat in Cardiff. 2 weeks later, his abandoned car was found at a service station near the Severn Bridge, which is a well-known suicide spot. A receipt from the bridge's toll booth showed that he'd crossed the bridge at 2:55 p.m., but it was later found out that the booths use a 24-hour clock system, meaning that he actually crossed at 2:55 a.m. There have been many reports of Edwards being spotted over the years in the Canary Islands and Newport Public Library, as well as places as far as Israel, causing many people to believe that he could have staged his own death in order to disappear. He remains missing to this day. Number 4. Sean Flynn, the son of well-known actor Errol Flynn, tried his hand at following in his father's footsteps, but by the mid-1960s, he gave up acting and started working for Time magazine as a photojournalist. He would take his camera into perilous war zones in Israel, Vietnam, and Cambodia, where he would strive to take thought-provoking and powerful photos of soldiers and the battles that they fought there. In 1970, Flynn traveled with US troops to combat zones in Vietnam, parachuting into dangerous conditions on more than one occasion, and he had to fight alongside the troops to stay alive, even being wounded in the knee on one occasion. On the 6th of April, Flynn was part of a group of journalists who were traveling for a press conference. All the journalists traveled by limousine except for Flynn and a fellow photojournalist, Dana Stone, who decided to go by motorcycle instead. While attending the press conference, Flynn learned that there was a makeshift checkpoint set up by the Viet Cong on a nearby highway. The checkpoint included a white four-door sedan parked across the road, in which several journalists who had gone missing were traveling in. The two men kept their distance at first, communicating with other journalists who were on the scene already. After witnessing a platoon of soldiers take up defensive positions at right angles to the road, Flynn and Stone made the decision to approach the checkpoint in a bid to interview some of the Viet Cong. Shortly before leaving, reporter Steve Bell took the last known photo of the two men. Witnesses later described seeing Flynn and Stone having their motorbikes immediately taken away and being marched into a nearby tree line. Neither Flynn nor Stone would ever be seen again, although it's widely believed that they were executed by the same soldiers. No one truly knows what happened once they entered the tree line, since their bodies were never found. Number 3. Michael Rockefeller was the son of the 41st Vice President of the United States, Nelson Rockefeller. He graduated from Harvard University, earning his BA in History and Economics. He served as a private in the U.S. Army for 6 months in 1960 and would go on to study the Asmat people of New Guinea, becoming an avid collector of their art. On November 17, 1961, after returning to the district of Agates to collect supplies for the following month, Rockefeller and Rene Wassing, a Dutch anthropologist, set out on a 40-foot dugout canoe towards southern Asmat. The trip would take them into a wild and largely unexplored area where they would meet up with a priest named Cornelius van Kessel, who knew the area well. They traveled down the Arafura Sea, aided by an outboard motor, as they reached the Betsy River, and they were met with crosswinds and strong conflicting currents. Up to this point, the water had been calm and easy to traverse, but the river mouth proved otherwise. Their canoe was hit by high waves, one of which flooded the outboard motor, and they were left without a means to make it to shore. After drifting for a short while, fighting the surf, the waves eventually overturned the canoe and they were stranded. 2 teenage guides who were accompanying the men jumped overboard and swam ashore, where they traveled for hours on foot over muddy ground to summon help from the people in Agates. During the night, the Dutch colonial government gathered airplanes, ships, and helicopters to aid in the search for the 2 men. But Rockefeller and Wassing would spend the night clinging to their canoe, unsure whether they were getting any closer to land. The following morning, Rockefeller became concerned that they would drift into open seas, and at about 8 a.m., he stripped down to his underwear, tied 2 jerry cans to his belt to help him stay afloat, and started swimming the 10 miles to shore, which was now barely visible. Wassing watched Rockefeller for as long as he could, but he eventually lost sight of him. That afternoon, Wassing was spotted from the air and he was rescued the following morning. The search for Rockefeller continued for a further 2 weeks, with his parents waiting for news about 150 miles away from Asmat, after chartering a Boeing 707 to the area. Many theories have been presented as to what happened to Rockefeller. Many believed that he drowned while attempting to swim ashore. Others think he may have been attacked by sharks or saltwater crocodiles, while others believe he fell victim to cannibalism. Number 2. Between 1939 and 1942, Glenn Miller was the best-selling recording artist with the Glenn Miller Orchestra. While acting as a composer and arranger, Miller was also the band's leader and trombonist. Among the better songs produced by the band are Chattanooga Choo Choo and Tuxedo Junction. In 1942, Miller decided to join the military and he applied to the Navy, but given that he was 38 years old, they replied that his services weren't needed. He then persuaded the US Army to accept him, and he would go on to front a civilian band which would entertain soldiers of the Allied forces. He would earn the rank of captain and eventually be promoted to major by August of 1944. On December 15th of that same year, Miller decided to travel to Paris from Bedford in the UK. He'd planned to move the entire band to Paris in the not-too-distant future, and he was on his way to make arrangements for this move. He boarded a single-engine Norseman plane on a farm in Clapham, a short distance from Bedford, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bessel and John Morgan, who was the plane's pilot. Contrary to popular belief, it was a casual flight in relatively clear conditions with no fog present. They wouldn't be flying anywhere near enemy bombers, and the only cause for concern was the fact that the model of plane they were in was recalled for faulty carburetors. The pilot flew close to the water in freezing temperatures, and as they reached the English Channel, the plane disappeared. It's widely believed that due to the low temperatures, fuel lines from the wing tanks of the aircraft froze, sending it into the waters below. However, speculation is rife, with some theories claiming that Miller did in fact make it to Paris, but died of a heart attack shortly after. Others believe that the plane was brought down by Allied bombers, returning from a failed mission over Germany, or that Miller was assassinated after being sent on a secret mission by Dwight Eisenhower to negotiate a Nazi Germany surrender. The only certainty is that Miller's disappearance remains a mystery. Number 1. At 26 years old, Hale Boggs was the youngest member of Congress after being elected in 1941. When his re-election bid failed the following year, he joined the US Navy, where he served as an ensign until the end of World War II. After the war, he returned to politics, and he would be re-elected 13 times, the last of which would occur after his disappearance. In October of 1972, age 58, Boggs was the US House of Representatives Majority Leader, and he was traveling on a Pan-Alaska Airways plane, a Cessna, from Anchorage to Juneau in Alaska. Also on board were Don Johns, who was piloting the plane, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and Begich's aide Russell Brown. Boggs, Begich, and Brown had planned to attend an election rally for Begich, and they boarded the plane at around 9 a.m. on the 16th of October. The flight path was laid out and would have them in the air for about 3.5 hours, starting over the Turnagain Arm of Cook Inlet, then heading to Juneau with the plane carrying enough fuel for a 6-hour flight. Conditions were described as marginal, meaning that isolated thunderstorms were expected and visibility would be limited to about 1.5 miles. They would have to fly below 700 feet in foggy conditions that included icy rain and turbulent headwinds. When the plane didn't arrive in Juneau, the largest search and rescue operation at the time was launched. 40 military aircraft and 50 civilian planes took to the sky to cover an area of over 325,000 square miles in a 39-day period, with pilots racking up a combined 3,600 flight hours. Ground patrols were sent to Portage Pass, which was searched twice, but no sign of the plane or any of the passengers was found. It was eventually decided that the plane had either crashed and sank into Prince William Sound, or that it had been covered by ice and snow after falling, though no real evidence for either theory exists. The search for Boggs's plane was called off on November 24th, and all 4 men were officially declared deceased on December 29, 1972. No part of the wreckage or any clue as to what really happened has ever been found. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.